A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. So, Daniel sent us this one, and it is a deep dive into the plumbing of global trade. He says, anybody who has dealt with receiving an international shipment has probably discovered that the process of moving even a small box of goods around the world is far more complicated than purchasing something from Amazon. The airway bill reigns supreme for tracking, and anyone who orders from Alibaba, depending on the Incoterms, may be dispensed to find out that they need to appoint a freight agent for clearing customs. Let's talk about the incredible role that freight forwarders play in lubricating the awkward joints in our international supply chain and shipping system. What does having a customs broker clearing your shipment actually mean? And if you were really determined, could you do it yourself?
Herman Poppleberry here, and man, Daniel, is hitting on something that feels like a dark art to most people. We are so used to the Amazon effect, where you click a button and a van appears at your house 12 hours later. But the moment you step outside that closed-loop ecosystem and try to move freight across a border, you realize you have stepped into a world governed by maritime law, 19th century bureaucracy, and very specific 8-digit codes. It's like the difference between buying a sandwich at a deli and trying to import the grain, the yeast, and the ham separately from 3 different continents.
It is that classic customs clearance in progress notification that sits there for 6 days, and you have no idea if your package is being inspected by a guy in a lab coat, or if it is just sitting in a pile of other boxes in a warehouse in New Jersey. By the way, fun fact for everyone listening, today's episode of My Weird Prompts is actually being powered by Google Gemini 1.5 Flash. It is the one pulling the strings on our dialogue today.
Well, hopefully Gemini knows its way around a harmonized tariff schedule because that is where the real pain lives. To understand this, we have to separate the 2 main characters Daniel mentioned, the freight forwarder and the customs broker. They are not the same thing, though they often work in the same office. Think of it like a movie production. The forwarder is the line producer making sure the cameras and actors show up, while the broker is the legal department making sure you have the permits to film on the street.
Right, so let's set the stage. If I'm a small business owner and I just bought a pallet of specialized LED components from a factory in Shenzhen, I am not calling China Southern Airlines and asking if they have room under a seat for my box. There is a middleman.
Well, not exactly in the way you think, but you are right about the middleman. The freight forwarder is essentially the travel agent for your cargo. They do not usually own the planes or the ships. What they own is the relationship and the data. They are architects. They look at your pallet in Shenzhen and they say, okay, we need a truck to pick this up, we need a warehouse to hold it until we have enough other boxes to fill a container, then we need to book space on a Maersk vessel, and then a rail car in Long Beach. They orchestrate the handoffs.
But wait, if they don't own the ships, how do they get better prices than I would? If I call Maersk directly, wouldn't I get a better deal?
You'd think so, but Maersk doesn't want to talk to you for one pallet. Forwarders are consolidators. They buy space in bulk, thousands of containers a year, and then they retail that space out to smaller shippers. It's the difference between trying to buy one egg from a massive industrial poultry farm or just going to the grocery store. The grocery store is the forwarder.
So they are the ones lubricating the joins, as Daniel put it. Because without them, that box just sits on a dock, and the ship captain isn't going to get off his bridge to go find your specific pallet.
He definitely is not. And that brings us to the first technical piece of paper Daniel mentioned, the Air Waybill, or AWB. If you are shipping by air, this is the document that reigns supreme. It is an 11-digit code that acts as the birth certificate and the passport for that shipment. The first 3 digits actually tell you which airline is carrying it. 001 is American Airlines, 160 is Cathay Pacific, 023 is FedEx. If you know those three digits, you can usually figure out whose plane your stuff is on.
But here's where it gets tricky for the average person. Daniel mentioned the master versus the house bill. I have definitely run into this where I tried to track a number on a carrier website and it says, number not found, but my forwarder says it is in the air. What is the disconnect there?
That is the difference between the MAW and the HAWB. The airline issues a master air waybill to the freight forwarder. That represents the entire unit load device, those big silver containers you see being pushed into the belly of a plane, which might contain cargo from 50 different companies. But the forwarder issues a house air waybill to you, specifically for your pallet. The airline's computer doesn't know who you are, it only knows the forwarder. You're tracking a sub-entry in the forwarder's internal system.
It is like being a passenger on a plane. The airline knows there are 200 people on board, but the airport shuttle bus only knows they have a contract to pick up a group of people from a specific tour company. You're just a line item on the tour company's manifest.
That is a rare analogy from you, Corn, but it works. Now we have to talk about the Alibaba trap Daniel mentioned, because this is where people lose a lot of money. It all comes down to Incoterms. These are the International Commercial Terms, last updated in 2020. They define exactly when the risk and the cost shift from the seller to the buyer.
I love Incoterms because they sound like a secret language. You see these three-letter codes like EXW or FOB or DDP, and people just click whatever is cheapest on the shipping drop-down menu, without realizing they just signed a contract that says they are responsible for a ship sinking in the middle of the Pacific.
That is the EXW trap. X works. If you buy something X Works Shenzhen, the factory's only job is to put the box on their own front porch. That is it. If the truck driver they hired drops it while loading, that's your problem. If it gets seized by Chinese customs on the way out because the factory didn't have an export license, that's your problem. You are responsible from the factory door to your door.
And most people think, oh, shipping is only $50, I'll take that. Then they realize they have to hire a Chinese logistics agent just to get the box to the port. But what about the other side of that? Like FOB. That's the one everyone sees on Alibaba.
Right, FOB or free on board. That is very common. The seller pays to get it onto the ship, but once it is past the ship's rail, as the old legal language goes, it is yours. If the ship hits a storm and your container goes overboard, you better hope you bought marine insurance, because the seller is already at the bar celebrating the sale. The real Amazon-like term is DDP, Delivered Duty Paid. That means the seller handles everything, including the taxes and the customs clearance. But as Daniel noted, DDP can be a gray area. Sometimes sellers use creative ways to clear customs, like declaring a $1,000 drone as a $10 plastic gift that might get you in trouble with an audit later because the duties weren't actually paid correctly.
So if I am sitting here in 2024 and I want to import something, and I see CIF, which is cost, insurance, and freight, that sounds like a good deal. They pay to get it to my country. What is the disappointment Daniel is talking about there?
The disappointment is the arrival fees. Under CIF, the seller pays to get the ship to the port in your country. But they don't pay for the ship to be unloaded. They don't pay the terminal handling charges, and they certainly don't pay the customs broker. So you get a call from a warehouse saying, hey, your pallet is here. You owe us $400 in dock fees. And by the way, if you don't clear this through customs in 48 hours, we're going to start charging you $100 a day for storage.
That is called demurrage, right? The most expensive parking spot in the world.
Well, not exactly, but yes. Demurrage and detention fees are the silent killers of small business imports. If you don't have a customs broker already appointed and ready to file your paperwork the second that ship hits the dock, you are in a race against the clock. I've seen cases where the storage fees ended up being more than the value of the goods themselves. The importer just ends up abandoning the cargo because it's no longer mathematically viable to pick it up.
So let's pivot to the customs broker. Daniel asked what it actually means to have one. In my head, I picture a guy with a briefcase and a badge who walks up to a shipping container, looks inside, and says, "This is fine." But I am guessing it is more about spreadsheets than briefcases.
It is almost entirely about the HTS, the Harmonized Tariff Schedule. Every single physical object in the world has an 8-digit or 10-digit code. and these codes are incredibly specific. If you are importing a smartwatch, is it a watch, which might have a high-duty rate to protect domestic watchmakers? Or is it a data transmission device, which under various trade agreements might be duty-free?
I remember seeing a case about whether X-Men action figures were dolls or toys, because dolls, which represent human beings, had a higher tax rate than toys, which represent non-human creatures like mutants. Marvel literally argued in court that the X-Men weren't human just to save on import duties.
That is a perfect example of what a customs broker does. They are essentially trade lawyers who specialize in classification. In the United States, there are only about 15,000 licensed customs brokers. It is a federally regulated profession. You have to pass a very difficult exam. Historically, the pass rate is often under 15%. You have to be bonded, and you carry legal liability. If a broker misclassifies your shipment and the government finds out, the broker can be fined or even lose their license.
But wait, how does the broker know what's actually in the box? Do they go to the port and open it?
Rarely. They rely on the commercial invoice and the packing list provided by the seller. If the seller lies and says it's plastic beads, but it's actually high-grade chemicals, the broker is usually protected if they acted with due diligence. But if the description is vague, like machine parts, a good broker will call you and say, I need more info. Is it a part for a car, a plane, a lawnmower? Because each of those has a different tax rate.
So when I pay a broker $150 to clear my shipment, I'm not just paying for data entry. I am paying for them to take the legal responsibility of telling the government, this box contains exactly what we say it does, and here is the correct check for the taxes.
Precisely. They are the buffer. When a shipment arrives, the broker files what is called the CBP Form 3461, which is the entry or immediate delivery form. That tells Customs and Border Protection, hey, this stuff is here, let it out of the warehouse. Then, within 10 days, they file Form 7501, the entry summary, which is the final accounting and the actual payment of the duties.
So the brokerage fee you see on your UPS or FedEx invoice is essentially you paying for their in-house broker to do that paperwork for you.
Right. And for most people, that is the way to go. But Daniel asked a very provocative question. If you were really determined, could you do it yourself? Could you self-clear and save that $100?
I feel like this is one of those things where the answer is yes, but you will regret it, like performing your own root canal.
It is very close to that. Technically, in the US and many other countries, an individual has the right to act as their own importer of record. But it is a physical and bureaucratic gauntlet. You generally cannot do this through a sleek web portal. You often have to physically go to the port of entry. If your package is at a bonded warehouse at JFK Airport, you have to go to the CBP office at JFK.
Wait, really? You have to drive to the airport in 2024?
In many cases, yes. You have to tell the carrier UPS, FedEx, or the airline that you are self-clearing. They will then give you a copy of the manifest or the airway bill. You take those papers to the customs office. You fill out the forms by hand or on their specific terminals. You pay the duty right there, usually with a check or through a specific electronic system. Then the customs officer stamps your paper with a released stamp. Then you have to take that stamped paper back to the warehouse to prove you paid your ransom, so they will give you the box.
And I'm guessing the warehouse isn't right next door to the customs office?
Oh, never. You'll be driving across the airport grounds through security gates looking for Warehouse B, Bay 4. And if you show up at 4:33 p.m. and they close at 5,000, there's a line. You're coming back tomorrow, and that's another day of storage fees.
That sounds like a whole day of work just to save $50 to $100. I can see why people just pay the fee.
It is a massive time sink, and there is the risk of the customs bond. If your shipment is valued over $2,500, you are legally required to have a customs bond. This is essentially an insurance policy that guarantees the government will get its money even if you disappear or go bankrupt. A single entry bond might cost you $50 to $150 anyway. So by the time you pay for the bond and spend 6 hours at the airport, you've actually spent more than the broker would have charged you.
Plus, if you get that HTS code wrong, you're not just getting a try again message. You could be looking at a seizure of goods or a red line inspection, where they rip your box open and charge you for the privilege of searching it.
Oh, the inspection fees are brutal. If Customs decides your smartwatch is actually a radio frequency device that needs FCC approval, and you didn't file the FCC paperwork, they will move that box to a Centralized Examination Station, or CES. You have to pay the trucking fee to move it there. You have to pay the storage fee while it sits there, and you have to pay the labor fee for the guys who open the box. I have seen $500 shipments turn into $3,000 nightmares because of one missing form.
This is why the freight forwarder is so important. They are the ones who should be catching these errors before the box even leaves the origin country. If they see you're shipping drones and you don't have the FAA or FCC compliance documents ready, a good forwarder will tell you, hey, stop, get your paperwork in order first.
That is the lubrication. They prevent the friction before it happens. And there's also the bonded warehouse aspect Daniel mentioned. These are essentially neutral zones. If you have a shipment that arrives but you aren't ready to pay the duties yet, or you're planning to re-export it to another country, you can store it in a bonded warehouse. Legally, those goods haven't entered the country yet. They are in a state of limbo.
It is like the International Space Station of logistics. You are in the country, but you aren't in the country. Does the government just trust the warehouse owner not to let you sneak the boxes out the back door?
Not at all. Bonded warehouses are under strict supervision. The owner has to post a massive bond with the government. If a single box goes missing, the warehouse owner is liable for huge fines and could lose their status. It's high-stakes storage.
It is great for cash flow though, right? If you're a business and you import $1 million worth of goods, you might not want to write a check for the $200,000 duty immediately. You put it in a bonded warehouse and only pay the duty on the items you pull out to sell each week. It keeps your capital from being tied up in taxes.
It's a strategic financial tool. Now, looking at the practical side for our listeners. If someone is starting an e-commerce brand or just buying something big from Alibaba, what is the gold standard workflow to avoid getting crushed by these awkward joins?
First, never trust the free shipping on a large B2B order unless it says DDP. If it says CIF or FOB, you need to call a freight forwarder in your own country immediately. Give them the quote from the factory and say, I need you to handle the on-carriage and the customs entry.
And don't wait until the ship is in the harbor to do that. You want to have your power of attorney signed with the broker before the goods even leave the factory in China.
Power of attorney? That sounds serious. Am I giving them the right to sell my house?
No, it's a limited power of attorney, specifically for customs business. It just gives them the legal right to sign those government forms on your behalf. Without it, they can't do anything. Also, you want your broker to look at the HTS code while the goods are still in the factory. They can tell you, hey, did you know there's a 25% Section 301 tariff on these specific items right now? That might change your entire profit margin.
I think people forget that trade wars and geopolitics actually manifest as these tiny 8-digit code changes. You might be importing something that was duty-free last year, but because of a policy change in Washington or Brussels, it now has a 50% anti-dumping duty.
That happens all the time with things like steel, aluminum, and even honey or garlic. There are some incredibly specific anti-dumping duties. If you're importing garlic from China, for example, the duties are astronomical to protect domestic farmers. If you don't know that, and you just think, hey, cheap garlic, you're going to get a bill from customs that will make your head spin. We're talking 300% to 400% duties in some cases.
So, the broker isn't just a paper pusher. They are your early warning system. They are the ones telling you that your cheap garlic is actually the most expensive garlic in the world once it crosses that invisible line.
And they handle the customs bond for you. For most small businesses, I recommend an annual continuous bond. It costs about $500 a year, but it covers every shipment you bring in for 12 months. It makes the process way smoother because your broker doesn't have to buy a new insurance policy for every single box. It also makes you look more legit in the eyes of the CBP computer system.
What about the DIY aspect? Is there any scenario where you actually should do it yourself? Maybe if you live next to the airport and you're only importing one item.
If you're a hobbyist and you're importing something like a vintage car part or a piece of machinery that's worth $3,000 and you have more time than money, it's a fascinating educational experience. You will learn more about the reality of global trade in 4 hours at a CBP office than you will in a year of reading books. You'll see the stacks of paperwork, the grumpy officials, and the sheer scale of the operation. But for a business? Absolutely not. Your time is worth more than the $100 brokerage fee.
It is the ultimate hidden infrastructure. You don't see it when it works, you only see it when it fails. And when it fails with a storage fee invoice attached to it. It's like the plumbing in your house. You don't think about the pipes until the toilet overflows.
The scale of it is what's wild to me. There are millions of these airway bills flying through the sky every single day, and each one represents a legal contract between a shipper, a carrier, and a government. It's this massive, invisible web of trust and documentation that keeps the world running. Even during the pandemic, when everything else stopped, these brokers were still at their desks, filing 7W1s, making sure the masks and the medicine kept moving.
It's funny how we've moved from 19th century paper ledgers to 21st century AI-powered tracking, but we still have these awkward joins, where a guy with a stamp has to say, yes, this is garlic, not a computer.
And that guy isn't going away. Even with blockchain and AI classification, governments are very protective of their borders and their tax revenue. They want a licensed human being, the broker, to be legally responsible for the accuracy of that data. You can't sue an AI for misclassifying a shipment, but you can certainly fine a broker or an importer. The human in the loop is a legal requirement in this industry.
So the lubrication is actually a combination of technical expertise and legal liability. That's a great way to think about it. It's not just about knowing which button to press, it's about knowing which person to call when the button doesn't work.
It really is. And for our listeners, the big takeaway is to respect the complexity. When you see a tracking number, don't just think of it as a "where is my box" button. Think of it as a digital representation of a dozen different handoffs, each with its own set of rules and risks. If you're buying from overseas, you aren't just a customer, you are an importer of record, and that carries actual legal weight.
And maybe be a little more patient the next time your package is in customs clearance. There's a whole world of brokers and agents fighting the HTS code wars on your behalf. They're navigating the Section 301 tariffs and the anti-dumping and countervailing duties, so you don't have to.
They are the unsung heroes of the global economy, corn. Without them, we'd all be sitting around waiting for our garlic that's stuck in a warehouse in New Jersey or a shipping container in Long Beach.
Well, I, for one, am happy to pay the $100 to keep the garlic moving. This has been a fascinating look at the plumbing, Herman. I think we covered the why and the how pretty thoroughly.
It's a rabbit hole that never really ends. Every time you dig into a new category of goods, you find a new set of regulations. Did you know there are specific rules for how many feathers can be in a pillow before it changes classification? Or the sugar content of chocolate? It's endless.
I'll save the feather count episode for another day. I've learned enough to know that I am never ever going to try to clear my own customs at the airport. I'll stick to the click-to-door experience and just pay the lubrication fee.
Smart move, Corn. Smart move. It's better to let the professionals handle the 19th century bureaucracy while we enjoy the 21st century results.
So, wrapping this up, if you're importing, check your Incoterms, know your HTS codes, or at least know someone who does, and remember that the airway bill is the king of the sky.
And don't forget the bond. Always remember the bond. It's your ticket to the fast lane.
Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes. And a huge thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show and allow us to keep exploring these weird prompts.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you learned something about the awkward joins of shipping today, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's the best way to help other people find the show.
You can find us at myweirdprompts.com for our full archive and RSS feed. And if you have a topic that's been on your mind, whether it's logistics, mutant toys, or the history of garlic tariffs, send it our way at show@myweirdprompts.com.
We'll see you in the next one.
Peace out. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash. Text to speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to